Thursday, May 23rd, the Pittsburgh Steelers continuing their first week of OTAs. It's great to have you all in with us. Jared Bailey with you as always. Joining me today is the hardest working man in Pittsburgh sports media, my friend Christopher Carter. It's good to see you, buddy.
Good to see you as well, Jared. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, man. No, it was good to see you during the day, during OTAs, and it was always an exciting time of year where we start the trek of OTAs, mini camp, and then we have that about month break in between until training camp. But this is football's it's in the air, and we get to see a lot of new faces wear some semblance of Steelers garments for the first time, it's pretty exciting. Oh my goodness, we lost Chris Carter. He just shot me a text that his computer crashed and he is coming back in. So what we're gonna do, I'm gonna tell you guys what I saw. This is on the fly show here. Hold on. Excuse me while I tell him no worries. Okay. So I was at the Rooney Sports Complex today for OTAs. First of all, it was hot. Very hot day on the south side. And if you read any of the work that I did over behind the steel curtain, you'll know other people I talked to. I briefly talked to Russell Wilson. He was in a little bit of a hurry. We caught him on the tail end of the locker room hours. We've got Chris Carter coming back in. This is on the fly podcasting, everybody. You gotta love it.
Very sorry about that shit.
No, dude, it's okay. It's okay. No, that was much quicker than I anticipated. That was great.
I've gotten used to my computer doing things when I least need it to. So I was like, I
think everybody in our field has gotten really good at quickly just restarting, getting back to where we need to be. Mm-hmm. So absolutely no worries. No, what I was saying was, it's that trek. It's, this time of year where we start this trek between OTAs, mini camp, and then that month break until we get training camp. But yeah, the first semblance of seeing a lot of new faces in some form of Steelers garments, attire on the field for the first time as Steelers. It's an exciting time of year.
Absolutely, it is. And we're especially this time around, right, Jarrett? Because for years, if you were in the Steelers, you were covering the Steelers. Well, it was just, hey, Ben Roethlisberger's back. We talked to him, and it was the same offense, same defense. And then even the past few years, it is Matt Canada. Could Kenny Pickett get it done? What's happening here? But this year, this is the most new I think we've seen the Steelers as far as in an OTA session to try to learn stuff. Because there's always been rookies and, a new player here, a new coach here or there. But you got a new offensive coordinator, an entirely new quarterback room, an offense that's looking to completely flip its identity into being something that the NFL is has actively moved away from being and being the rough and tough style of playing physical football. And all while this team has stayed afloat and they still haven't tanked. They still haven't done the thing that the Bengals did to get Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, that the Texans did to get CJ Stroud and Will Anderson. So it's very interesting to continue to learn about this team while still having all the familiar faces on the defensive side of the ball, like TJ Watt, Minka Fitzpatrick. Cam Hayward's not around OTAs, but still you still have that sense of leadership that's existing on the team.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically an almost entirely new offensive coaching staff where new receivers coach, new quarterback coach, new offensive coordinator, and a lot of new faces. We're seeing Russell Wilson take the field for the first time and Justin Fields as well. By the way, Russell Wilson launching a moon ball during team drills today that would have gone for, 80-yard touchdown to Quez Watkins. So stuff like that's exciting to see in a new offense with a bunch of new faces. In your opinion, though, from the past couple of days, who has stood out to you in terms of these workouts? Obviously, it's not padded, it's not full contact, but what have been some of your key takeaways, I would say, from the first few days?
I think it's been interesting to see the fluidity that we've seen in the offense and just how they've been working on things. I've been fascinated simply by how Zach Azzani, the new receivers coach, has been up in everyone's face, just challenging them at every turn. You see him going to George Pickens, like George Pickens will make a catch in a drill. And he'll be like, go now. And he'll like push him. Don't just catch and just jog through it. Sprint through this, get this done, and working with them to do hand techniques to beat different presses, and just the consistent, like, hey, we got to get this done, and we got to get this done fast because there's something else I need to get you to work with. And there's this sense of urgency in getting the details done that I don't remember being as loud last year. Like there was always like, hey, there's practices, there's things we want to accomplish, but this seems like it's just so much more rigid as far as all the things that the guys are trying to do, especially the offensive side of the ball. Defense, I'm honestly seeing a lot of the same, and that's a good thing because the defense has been very good to great. As long as they don't have 5 practice squatters out there, they're usually doing pretty well. But with the offense, I'm seeing guys like understanding systems more and more. And I got to talk to Calvin Austin a little bit after practice on Thursday. And, I asked him, what's Zach Azzani like? And he's like, he don't play. Like, he's like, you're either here or you're not. And he's like, he doesn't accept mediocrity. He when he challenges you to do something, you better do it. And it's becoming like the standard is the standard thing. If I don't get my job done, I ain't going to be playing. So it's kind of setting that. And I think that could be really good for this wide receiver room because it's extremely young. You got George Pickens. I think it's a great challenge for George Pickens to see like, hey, this coach is asking a lot out of you. He's going to push you to sharpen your skills, the skills that you haven't sharpened yet in your career. And how does that translate to you growing? Does he accept that challenge? Does he push himself a little bit more? I think the Steelers need more voices like that in the smaller rooms to kind of, help with what Arthur Smith's trying to do, with Mike Tomlin's trying to do with this group. And that's something that I've really noticed. And I think that it's at least we're seeing the early remnants of it, even when it comes to the offensive line, who they can't hit anybody, but they're working on their fundamentals. It's like, hey, we need to get to the point. Like I talked to Troy Fautano the other day, and he talked about how there's a PowerPoint that Arthur Smith sat down with like a lot of the guys in the offense and was saying, hey, if we're going to be the most physical team in the NFL, we got to do this, we got to do this, we got to do this. And it's like step by step. And now what they're doing is they're in the first couple stages of that, getting all those fundamentals in place, setting that foundation so that when they're hitting each other with pads come late July and then into August in Latrobe, they are much further along than they would have been if they hadn't done all this.
Yeah, it felt like a very vocal practice in all the best of ways. Where, I talked to Russell Wilson briefly after practice, and he highlighted even Mike Tomlin being very energetic. He's like, that's one of the reasons he's a Hall of Fame coach is finding ways to get guys invested in stuff like this. And you look at all the changes that have been made. We talk about the receivers and whatnot, but some new faces in the secondary as well. Yes. A couple of them had some really nice days. Beanie Bishop, the undrafted rookie out of West Virginia, had a few nice plays today in team drills. Darius Rush had a couple really nice plays, and he just looked fast all day wherever they were using him. I talked to him after practice and just asked him about his versatility, how he feels playing, in the nickel, out wide. And he said, look, man, if you want playing time, you got to be versatile and you got to be willing to do different things. So, whether it be nickel, outside, kickoff, I'm willing to do, whatever I got to do. And it's like that type of attitude that you want to hear from these guys, especially in a young secondary that are, if it's an iron sharpens iron situation. I mean, we're seeing 2 examples of that specifically today with Bishop and Rush. Obviously, Joey Porter looking for a big year too. Dante Jackson being the vet. Like this is it's a room that is it's young, but he also highlighted this. You need young, fast guys to keep up with receivers in today's NFL, and they feel they have a lot of young, fast guys.
Yeah, they do, and I think that the cornerback room especially is a very unique position right now for the Steelers because I've talked to pretty much all of them at this point in this OTA session. I got to talk to Dante Jackson, and he's kind of the old head, right? Everyone else, Joey Porter Jr., second year, Cory Trice, second year, Darius Rush, second year, all these Beanie Bishop, rookie, all these guys, they're still figuring out how to play in the NFL. For him, he's just plugging and playing like, look, I know how to work assignments. I know what I'm expecting when I'm lining up against an NFL wide receiver. But I think it is going to be really interesting to see where guys line up. And I also think it's very good that everyone kind of has this sense of, I'm trying to get in where I'm going to get in. Like I'm trying to fit into whatever I'm asked to fit into. And I'm not resigning myself to be, oh, no, I'm playing outside. Oh, no, I'm doing this over here. I'm doing that over there. And those are at least the right things that you need them to say at this point. Now, players change over time. We see it would happen with everybody. You know, if you remember Melvin Ingram when he came to the Steelers, in his OTAs and everything, he was like, "Oh no, I don't care how much I play. Alex Highsmith, he's a nice guy, and if he starts, it's okay." And then after 4 weeks of him not starting, he's like, "Get me out of here."
Right.
So, but Melvin Ingram, and Mike Tomlin even said this later that season, he kind of hinted at it. He was like, there's a reason we don't like to sign free agents a lot for big money, because we want guys that we grow and that we bring into the game, and so that you can kind of weed out those type of moments. So hearing that from all these guys that are basically coming up through the Steelers, Joey Porter, Cory Trice, draft picks, Darius Rush brought to the Steelers and kept. And Darius Rush, I talked to him, I think Wednesday, and he was talking about how, like, look, I'm really appreciative because like I was on 3 teams my rookie season.
Said the exact same thing to me today. Yep.
Exactly. And just the appreciation of like, hey, I'm here, but I'm not just happy to be here. I'm looking to prove while I'm here. And I think that's what's really, really good about the Steelers right now, is they have a lot of guys like that. And this has been I've talked about this a lot on Locked On Steelers. I've talked about this a lot on the North Shore Drive podcast. I think one of the biggest objectives of this offseason, of this OTAs and what will be of training camp, is resetting the offensive culture. And in some of the younger cultures of the Steelers, I think the defense, everyone's kind of there's been a leadership that's never dropped off there. Like, you know, I talked to Ryan Shazier about this like a month ago. You know, you go from Casey Hampton, James Ferrier, Troy Polamalu, James Harrison, Lawrence Timmons, Cam Hayward, Ryan Shazier, TJ Watt, Minka Fitzpatrick. There's no drop off of that unit ever having leaders, right? And there was a succession plan for 20 years where guys passed on the baton. There was a cutoff for the offense. Pouncey, DeCastro, Bell, Brown, Ben, all the guys that were considered the best and biggest players of the offense, none of them got to pass down any torches to the next guys who are here now. So, you know, you look at that and you're like, man, like there has to be a culture reset. And I think that's part of the problem that they kind of experienced the last couple of years with Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett didn't inherit anything. He was having to create stuff. And when things weren't going well, that's hard to do. So what do? You get Russell Wilson, who knows about culture. You bring in guys like Isaac Seumalo, who know about culture, who can set that tone, and then bring in young guys who are willing to who understand, hey, before you can be a great leader, you got to be a great follower. And I think that's what they're getting out of a lot of these guys, is if they get a lot of great followers who can turn into your lieutenants, they can reset the whole leadership side of things in the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, Omar Khan's talked about that a lot this offseason too, where, you know, he's talked about, we want to find Steelers. And, you know, he's like, I can't really put that into words, but like, we just kind of know when we have a guy that we want. He mentioned Isaac Seumalo as a perfect example. Like, when they brought him into the building, they knew, okay, we want this guy around. So there's definitely been a shift in terms of the culture for, you know, all of the betterment. You know, we got a lot of here, highlight some YouTube comments, everybody joining us tonight. Mark Miller saying, Bailey and Carter critiques best duo since Smokey and the Bandit. How kind of you to say. In terms of, you know, other young guys making plays, Payton Wilson. I noticed that when the Steelers, they were in team drills, they went into their dime look. They kept Payton Wilson on the field as the dime backer. I asked him about that after practice, and he's like, yeah, man, like the fact that they are already kind of giving me that much trust, showing that much faith in me, I mean, that's huge. And he also noted, like, look, me, PQ, Landon Roberts, Cole Holcomb, like, this can be a very special linebacker group. You touched on, you know, the names of the Timmons, the Ferrier, the Harrison, the Larry Foots of the world. I don't know if we've seen a linebacking group that can be as good as it can be since, you know, 20 years ago with those guys.
Yeah, it's a great point, because for the longest time, like Larry Foote was not a cover guy. He was a thumper. He went in and hit. You didn't need this many cover guys. You didn't, because the NFL used to be like, hey, you had your Mac and your Buck. The Mac could cover a little bit and he could hit. But the Buck was the guy that I'm here to take out the fullback. I'm here to blitz. I'm here to stuff the run. That's my job. Now you kind of need in today's NFL 2 Mac linebackers who can do both at a really good level. That's why I think it was really important for them to get Patrick Queen. I talked to him Wednesday, and he had a lot of great stuff to say about this expectations and what the Steelers are trying to do. And I loved Payton Wilson in college. He was one of my top 40 players in the draft. I think he
was the consensus top linebacker in the class.
The only thing that held him back was the injury history, was people wondering how long it's going to be. I talked to people that covered him at NC State that were like, there are legitimate concerns from people we've talked to that he might only last 4 to 5 years in the NFL because of his injuries. But you look at his 40 time, you look at his instincts on the field, the ability to break on the ball, the ability to read the ball, to read the quarterback, to read plays and process, his size, the willingness to stick his body in there and make the tough hits, the tough plays. Those are the things that I think that Payton Wilson can immediately translate to the NFL and get good results on. And if the Steelers are able to have that, like you said, with Landon Roberts, who did a great job last year, with Patrick Queen, who I think can even do a better job last year, and then those 3 play well until Cole Holcomb is healthy and ready to go and he comes back into the fold, all of a sudden you got 4 linebackers that you trust to be good enough in coverage, stuff the run. And now that position that you pointed out, it has been the weak point of the Steelers defense since Ryan Shazier was knocked out. And when they lost him for the 2017 season, they have tried John Bostic, they've tried Sean Spence, they've tried everything and everywhere. They tried Devin Bush for
Joe Schobert in there as well. Joe
Schobert, Miles Jack, they've tried everything, and it hasn't stuck. And it's been a point that the offenses have needled at for years. And now, if this is the group that fixes it, all of a sudden that defensive front that can still be extremely dominant. I talked to Deshaun Elliott. He's like, this defensive front, they're going to be lights out, man. Like, I'm playing with a group that makes me not have to work half the time because they're just getting to the backfield. And then you combine that with the safety group they have, and if Dante Jackson can play well, if Joey Porter Jr. can take a step up from where he was last year, and they can find one more piece to help in the slot and a backup guy, like, this could be a complete defense. And a big part of that is the linebacker group. And I think a big part of that could be Payton Wilson for the next few years.
Absolutely. And, you talk about the nickel spot and everything, we already talked about, like, that's where, we're going to see Cory Trice, Darius Rush, Beanie Bishop, if they bring somebody else in from the outside. But in terms of the guys they have in-house right now, I mean, that's what they're competing for is, hey, can you play the nickel? How good can you do it? This defense as a whole, though, it's been one of the better units in the league for consistently for quite some time.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that they are now seemingly getting younger and they have a mix of getting younger and also bringing in like proven veterans with Patrick Queen, which, by the way, not a move that we're very used to seeing as Steelers fans. The 3-year, $41 million deal for Patrick Queen is the largest external contract the Steelers have ever given anybody. Mm-hmm. So it does feel very much, while a new era on the field in terms of the thought process and bringing in these players, it's a new era in the front office too.
Absolutely. And I mean, Patrick Queen, the uniqueness of the opportunity to get a Patrick Queen, this is a guy who was drafted to lead a linebacker room, and then they went and got Roquan Smith, and the Ravens were like, we can't pay both of these guys super money, so you got to let one of them go. So now you're getting a guy who has 4 years of experience, who's 25 years old with 4 years of experience, who can lead your linebacker room. That is huge. And again, you're not asking Patrick Queen to be your superstar. I talked about this on the Thursday episode of Locked On Steelers. Patrick Queen is not being asked to be Fred Warner or Roquan Smith. He's not asking to be the best player on the defense. He's asking to be a solid linebacker that glues everything together. So Minkah Fitzpatrick can be the best safety in football. So TJ Watt can be the best edge rusher in football. And then you can have all these other players there. And if he's a really good role piece in the middle of that, that is an extremely great value to have. And again, at 25 years old, he could do this 3 more years and then be in his prime at linebacker.
Yeah.
Like that is what's really scary. If I'm an opponent, if I'm another team, I'm like, they got Patrick Queen. Do they need any more money on the defense? Like, come on, man. Like that's where I do think there's something special there. And again, it's why I get that the AFC North is tough. I get that the Browns still got their defense, and I get that the Bengals are getting back Joe Burrow, and I get that the Ravens have Lamar Jackson. They're adding good pieces, and I'm not saying I dislike any of those teams or what they are. I actually think the Browns are kind of more vulnerable this year, but I don't think the Steelers are just some chumps that are just going to get pushed around in this division. They were 5-1 last year. Granted, Joe Burrow didn't play, but you know what? The last year that they played Joe Burrow, they were 1-1 against him, and one of those wins was with Mitch Trubisky, and the other, the one they lost with Kenny Pickett, and they lost by 7. So, I think that they're going to be able to handle the AFC North better than some people give them credit for. I think that certainly there are going to be some tough games on the schedule. That Chiefs game is going to be rough, but I think this team has a lot of things going for it. That as long as they're not decimated by injury, as long as the offense does come together, I think that this is a team that is very much not just in the playoff hunt, but a problem in the playoff hunt.
So many people that watch this show consistently are going to love your comments about the Bengals because they're probably tired of me telling them how good I think the Bengals are going to be. So they're going to have an ally in you. I want your opinion on this too, because a lot of people were upset about the scheduling aspect of things where, oh my goodness, they don't play a division game until week 11 and 6 of their final 8 are against the division. My thought process is, well, the way that the Steelers want to play football, you're playing your divisional foes in November, December. That plays into your hand rather than against you. I think it's actually a good thing that they're seeing all of their divisional games come, November, December, where, you can play more of a run smash mouth style of football, which is what the Steelers want to do with, keep the score down, run the ball, time of possession, especially late in the season when that becomes more difficult for some teams to do. I think that plays right into the Steelers' hand.
On top of that fact, which is a very good point by you, that later in the year is when smash mouth football becomes more important. But also in just when the Steelers have typically been good. You look at,
they typically get hot late.
Exactly. They get hot late. And it's that first month that once they get past that, they're a much better team typically. I had to do this research because I did the schedule release show for Channel 11 WPXI. And I looked up all of Mike Tomlin's records with the Steelers in the months of play. So the 4 main months of the regular season. In September, they're 30-26-1. That's a 53.6 win percentage. Not bad, not great, but not bad. But in October, they are 44-21. That's 67.7%. That's just over 2/3 of other games. November, they're 43-23-1. That's 64.2%. Just right around then. And then in December, they're 46-29. That's 61.3%. So from October to December, they are winning more than 60% of their games in those stretches. And that's the time when they're getting to play all their divisional games this year.
Yeah.
You're right. I think that actually plays to them. Now, here's the thing. They cannot afford a TJ Watt to go out for 3 weeks. They can't afford Minkah Fitzpatrick to go out for a month. And if they lose key players in those stretches, that could be a problem. But if they're playing their best football in the October, well, they won't play anyone in October, but in November and December, and they catch on a serious string, those wins not only help them, but they push down the other divisional opponents and give them tiebreaker opportunities. It could end up working out in their favor. It's funny. I see people say, "Oh, the Steelers, they're done, man. They can't survive the back end of the schedule." I'm like, have y'all not seen how the Steelers have survived the last several years with Devlin Hodges, with Kenny Pickett, with Mason Rudolph? They were 7-7 last year, and people were like, "Well, they're done. They're not going to do anything." They finished 10-7 because they had to. Because when it's time to lock in, they do, to make sure that they at least they limp their way either to the playoffs or just to avoid the losing season. Now, give them a better start. Like if they come out the gates gunning this year, and here's where I think it actually works in their favor, how this all things can be scheduled. Their season opener, the Falcons. Mike Tomlin's never lost to Atlanta.
Yep, 4-0.
You play a lot of rookie coaches or rookie quarterbacks. And to me, if they come out of the first, I think, 9 games of the season with 6 or 7 wins, this team's making the playoffs. Because
absolutely,
like at that point, all you need to do in the last what's that 8 games? Math sucks. I'm trying to put together.
It'd be the last 8 games of the season. Yeah,
the last. So after the Commanders game that comes right after the bye, if they come out of out of those last 8 games with if they're 7-2 after beating all the teams that aren't as tough in the earlier part of their schedule because they're playing, they're more consistent, they're doing the things they've done for the last few years, and they're better on offense,
right?
Then they could go 3-5 down the final stretch, and that's still 10 wins there. And again, that's 3-5 down the stretch. We're talking about the better part of the year where this is when they play better football. That's when I think this team could really be. They could be a much more dangerous team. And again, there's a million things that have to be calculated. Sure. Is Russell Wilson good this year? Is Justin Fields good this year? Does Arthur Smith's offense translate? Does the offensive line coalesce? There's lots of questions that have to be to get there. But as I was talking to my buddy Josh Taylor, who works at 93.7 The Fan and KDKA TV here in Pittsburgh, and we were like, if there are so many things that should just be better by default, not like Zach Frazier. The man just got to stay on the field, and he's probably better than Mason Cole, right?
Absolutely.
Arthur Smith, he just needs to not throw darts at a dartboard blind, and he's probably better than Matt Canada. Russell Wilson, if he just gives you what he gave Denver last year, that's better than what the Steelers have had even since 2020 Ben Roethlisberger.
Right.
So you get those basic things and still a top 10 defense. They're more than a 10-win team because they were a 10-win team last year with all that stuff going wrong and with practice squatters all across their defense. Right. I think this Steelers team has a lot more going for it than people think.
I do too. And every year we kind of do this cycle, right? Where, the Steelers will finish, even if it's like a down season for the Steelers, they'll finish, between 8 and 10 wins. We'll go through the offseason, the Browns will make a move, the Ravens will make some sort of move, the Bengals, everybody will do their preseason projections, be like, oh man, I think this is the year the Steelers are going to finally fall apart. This is the year they're going to finish last in the division. Chris, they haven't finished last in the division since 1988. I
wasn't even alive. I was born in 89.
I was born in 98. So we haven't, it's been so long since the Reagan administration, since they finished last in the AFC North or Central. And every year we got to do this thing where it's like, oh, this is finally going to be the year. Probably not, man. And you pointed out, they got better at quarterback. They got better at center and across the offensive line.
Yeah.
They got better at offensive coordinator, quarterback, offensive line. Defensively, where they were already good, they got better. I can't see this team somehow being worse than what they were last year, and they were a tire fire that still somehow won 10 games.
Mm-hmm. That's what's so impressive about when people they try to make fun of Mike Tomlin never having a lose. It's so funny. They have turned Mike Tomlin not having a losing season into some negative thing. They're like, oh, he just wants his non-losing seasons. But it's like, do you realize what has to happen to avoid that? Like the galvanizing effort that it takes. The Devlin Hodges year, they should have been tanked.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even when they traded for Minkah Fitzpatrick, that team should have had no business winning 8 games that season. Yet somehow they did with a duck collar at quarterback. And so now you're here where Mitch Trubisky was your starter for a bit. You see how Mitch Trubisky's panned out. It's a miracle they won games in a lot of those situations. Mason Rudolph, who got benched way back for Devlin Hodges, the duck collar, won you 3 games in a row last year. And even Kenny Pickett. And I want to say this as a guy who covered Kenny Pickett at Pitt, who covered Kenny Pickett for the Steelers. I have nothing against Kenny Pickett. I always said, look, I was very honest. You and I were talking about this in the cafeteria today. Pitt fans would get mad at me when I was being honest, like, hey, Kenny's not getting it done. But then people who didn't like Kenny Pickett, didn't like what I was honest, like, hey, these are very basic things that I've seen Kenny Pickett do that if he just honed in, he can get this basic part and he can be just a solid quarterback that just works in a system that's designed to work. The problem is there was no system for the offense last year, so it was never going to work. So Kenny Pickett, maybe he gets a redemption someday in the NFL and he shows everyone, hey, I could be a starting quarterback. But the Steelers now, they don't have to worry about that. They don't have to worry about someone trying to figure out how they're going to play into the NFL. Russell Wilson knows how to do that. I think Justin Fields knows how to do that. And the Bears were just like, look, man, we love you, but that guy's Caleb Williams, and we're gonna go take him with the first overall pick. You got 2 guys one guy who's done it before and one guy who has some of the best upsides, I think, of young quarterbacks in the NFL who aren't signed to, a veteran contract yet in Justin Fields. And again, like you said, better center. The Broderick Jones is only going to be a better player this year. I think Troy Fautanu, give him just a little bit, he'll be better than what Dan Moore was. And then, I do think you got questions at wide receiver. I do think you got to figure out who's the number 2 and who's the number 3 behind George Pickens. But Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren, still one of the more dynamic 1-2 punches, and now with a better offensive line and a better quarterback to keep attention away from them. It all adds up to me being a more competitive Steelers team this year. And who knows, maybe the schedule is brutal for them. Maybe they do drop some games that they didn't last year later in the season. But I have to think by default, this team is better, will be better. And again, in OTAs, it's fun because now we're seeing the building blocks of it. The questions that I always like to tie back things that I heard in May to things that I hear in November. And in past years, I've heard about how hey, we are making it a point on defense that we are going to I remember TJ Watt, one of the things that he talked about going into his earlier camps was he needed to develop more moves. He needs to develop more things. He needs to get used to the NFL to do that. And his first training camp, I always tell this story. I was there for his rookie year, and he was going up in one-on-ones against Xavier Grimble, if you remember him as a tight
end. Yep.
And Xavier Grimble was whooping him. And I mean, it was like, ugh. And you could see TJ getting frustrated, like, oh, why can't I do this? And James Harrison, who was still there at the time, was like, no, come here. And he pulls him to the side. I can't hear them, but I see James Harrison kind of showing him, hey, use the rip, get under, do this. And the next rep, he went up against Grimble. He used the rip move, and he got it done. And the rookie year, he had, if you look back at his early games his rookie year when he got some sacks, he was doing those moves, and then those moves kind of faded by the end of part of the season because, as rookies happen, the things you learn early in the year start to fade because every week you're just learning what the new plays are, what the new opponent is. But then by TJ's second year, he had a whole offseason to work on those things, to develop those things. And then we saw all those moves start to come back and just be a natural part of his game. And then he became TJ Watt. So I listen for what are those building block things for guys like Broderick Jones, Troy Fautanu, Zach Frazier, and even George Pickens and guys that we've seen for a few years. What are they focusing on? How are they growing on them? Those are the things that I think are really fun to talk about right now.
Yeah. And like I said, this is really, the beginning point of this, long 7-month journey where, we're going to find out what the 2024 Steelers story is. We got a few more comments coming in. Our secondary is the gap between us owning the AFC North, currently built to stop Browns and the Ravens. If those young avatar-like corners we have developed be able to stop the Bengals more effectively. Yeah, do you remember a few years ago, I think it was Ben's, it was Ben's last year, whenever they went to Cincinnati and lost, 41-10, and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins had like 1 trillion yards receiving apiece.
Took over.
Yeah. So now, you look at the potential of a Cory Trice, who obviously missed all of last year. And by the way, he's looked good in OTAs. He's rocking the knee brace and everything, but he's looked good with what work we've seen him put in. Young avatar. I like that term for them. Young potential avatar-like athletes. I think that you got a Joey Porter who we expect to still be at least at the level that he was, take a step forward. A lot of young guys, but I think that the future for them is bright at the position.
Absolutely. I think it's very bright. I think there's the potential is there, and the getting of Dante Jackson makes it so that none of the Trices or the Rushes have to do it right away. They have time to grow into it. I think Joey Porter Jr. needs to take a step up this year, but I also think Joey Porter Jr. is one of the more prepared people in the NFL to do that. I think that this is a guy who lives, sleeps, and eats football. Like he's all about studying it, but he also I think he has the healthy understanding of how to do it and get better at things. So you pair him with a solid veteran in Dante Jackson, and then again with a safety group in KZ and Minka Fitzpatrick and now Deshaun Elliott, who I talked to, and I get a real good sense that he's going to fit in well with this team. You could have a secondary that's maybe they're not the best secondary in the NFL, maybe they're not even the top 10, but if they are just if the corners are just at average or slightly above average, and the safeties play very well, You pair that with the linebacker core we just hyped up. You pair that with TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, Cam Hayward, Keanu Benton, Larry Ogunjobi. You pair that with all of that. I think that's where the Steelers defense is. The sum of its parts are going to equal so much better than what people have seen in recent years because they haven't been able to glue it all together. Now, I think, especially with this linebacker group, it will be much easier to do that.
Yeah, and you talked about the linebackers that the Steelers have gone through. We could do the same thing with the corners that they've gone through over the past few years. Like no disrespect to Levi Wallace, but it wasn't getting the job done last year. Patrick Peterson, even for the most part, he didn't start playing really effectively until he was moved back to safety because of injuries. James Pierre, other names that they've gone through. So this is a group where I like the point that you made there about not wanting to have to make Trice or somebody else do it right away. Where I remember a few years ago, they didn't really have an answer at nickel. They trotted out, the Trey Norwoods of the world. Arthur Millette eventually kind of became that guy, but they made Minkah Fitzpatrick wear a lot of hats that season because it was more so out of necessity. So I think the future's bright for this, the secondary, and the defense as a whole is going to be, it's going to be fun to watch. Mark says, I know summer's the time for optimism, but I honestly think this could be a surprising year, especially if they're able to sign a quality free agent or two. Yeah, I mean, there's still a few different, the Steelers are one of those teams that people keep pointing to as hey, probably going to sign a corner. We talked about receivers, but hey, maybe the corner is still available. I think I saw, was it 33rd team said that a Dory Jackson would make sense for the Steelers. Maybe they go out and do a move like that. We'll see.
Yeah.
But
Juju's old roommate.
Is that so?
Mm-hmm.
Did not know that.
When what team was he with? I forget what team drafted him. Was it the Patriots?
The Titans.
It was the Titans, right? It was the Titans because Juju had a really good game, and I asked him about that. What was that like? Kind of getting to dap up because they exchanged jerseys and everything. He's like, "Yo, that was one of the coolest things ever." So, Adoree Jackson, I think he was a first-round pick, and former Juju roommate when they were both at USC together.
Everything comes back to the Steelers at some point. Everything comes back. There's another thing I wanted to bring up to you. Oh, the kickoff rule, because that obviously that's new and everything. We're gonna see some different stuff. Did you see all the different formations or the different people that they were putting out there? Do you think that was more out of okay, we just need bodies to kind of do this walkthrough, or are we really gonna see Braden Fehoko on kickoff coverage? Because I'm here for it.
I think they're experimenting because here's the thing: nobody knows what this is about to be like.
Right.
Everyone's just throwing things out there because you know what? If I don't need my guy to run 80 yards or 60 yards or whatever, and I just need you to crash that group. Yeah, I might put a Braden Fehoko. I might put a Keanu Benton. Hey, be a boulder, crash them. Just destroy them so that everyone can come in behind you and make the big play. I think it could make sense, but I think everyone's kind of feeling out because here's the other thing. I could totally see this like things, people experimenting things, thinking that they work in camp, and then the things they experimented on get exploited by some team that just, it's just the wildness of things meshing that we've never got a chance to study for before on the professional level. So people often ask me, what do you think what's going to happen with kickoffs? I gotta be honest. I'm like, I don't know, man. I ain't never studied this before at this level. You could look at XFL all you want and see how it's done there, but it don't matter until you see them dudes that are built 6'4" and run the 4.3 40-yard dash, until all them NFL type dudes that are built like that do this and they all compete across 32 teams at it. Yeah. We could be in for some wild stuff with kickoffs this year. I don't know what that's going to look like, and that's another thing that's really interesting about this season.
Yeah, and that was another thing I asked Payton Wilson because another mutual friend of ours from Steelers now, Nick Farabaugh, and I were watching together, and they look like they were almost running a gap run type thing on offense, having Payton Wilson run behind Keanu Benton, and I think it was Fehoko, basically being okay, they're going to be space eaters. Somebody's going to take them up, just split the gap and go get the ball carrier on kickoff coverage. We're going to see some fun, innovative stuff when it comes to this. And when it comes to preseason ball, I know that there's, the overall record and how a team looks overall is kind of deceptive. Steelers fans know that from last year, but the individual performances at least are okay, we could see what comes from this. Now we're adding kickoffs into this where it's going to be another thing okay, let's see what teams do in the preseason when it comes to this and see how innovative we can really get.
Absolutely. I think it's a lot of it is going to be experimentation, seeing what happens. And I'll say this too. Danny Smith is a guy who's been very innovative as far as figuring out how things work, the different ideas that he has. I think that there's a lot the Steelers could do there. But again, it's just going to be taking it one step at a time. But yeah, we'll see how special teams works out. But I would not be shocked to see some interesting wrinkles that kind of catch everyone off guard with how the Steelers do this.
Absolutely. All right, Chris, we'll get you on out of here. What have you got coming on just everything that you're doing? Like I said, you are anywhere and everywhere these days.
Absolutely. You can find me at the Locked On Steelers podcast every day, Monday through Friday, breaking down the Pittsburgh Steelers on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Just like you can find me on the North Shore Drive podcast, where I do with the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays for the on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. You can also read my work at post-gazette.com. We've got a lot of stuff going on there. I write on Pitt. I also do a little bit of Steelers there as far as the writing side, but a lot on the talking side. So Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Locked On Steelers podcast, also Channel 11 WPXI sometimes. I like Jarek said, I've been wearing all the hats, and I'm happy to do so. It's a fun life to live when you get to talk about sports for a living.
Absolutely. In terms of me, we will be here every weekday night. Wasn't here last night. I was just very tired. So, but yeah, usually throughout the off season, Monday through Friday, to watch Black and Gold Breakdown here on this channel. Written work, go read Behind the Steel Curtain for SB Nation. All the coverage from the OTAs are up there in terms of my perspective. So go read all of that. On the USA Today side of things, did a piece on Trevor Lawrence. If that's your cup of tea and you want to keep reading my expanded NFL coverage, go and do that. But Chris, appreciate the hell out of you, buddy. Cannot wait to get through this season with you, and we'll see what it holds for the Steelers.
Absolutely.
Thanks everybody for watching. We'll be back tomorrow for more Black and Gold Breakdown. See you then.